I'm 82 years old and I just figured out the one truth that explains every regret I have. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. My name is George. I've been alive for 82 years, and I thought I'd learned all the big lessons life had to teach. But 6 months ago, something happened that made me realize there was one truth I'd been running from my entire life. One painful, unavoidable truth that explained every mistake I'd made, every relationship I'd destroyed, every opportunity I'd missed. And now that I see it, I understand why my life turned out the way it did. That truth is this: the person you're most afraid to disappoint is yourself. And because of that fear, you'll spend your whole life disappointing yourself to avoid facing that fear. You'll make safe choices. You'll stay in situations that hurt you. You'll give up on dreams before you even try. All because actually going for what you want means risking the disappointment of failing. And that feels more terrifying than never trying at all. I know that sounds twisted, but I lived it for 82 years. And I need to tell you how this played out in my life, because once I saw this pattern, I saw it everywhere. In every major decision I'd made. In every fork in the road where I chose the path that kept me safe from my own judgment. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in rural Montana in the 1940s. My father owned a small ranch. Cattle, mostly. It was hard work. Physical labor from sunrise to sunset. My father expected me to take over the ranch one day. It's what his father expected of him. That's how it worked. You inherited the family business and you carried it on. But I didn't want to be a rancher. I wanted to be a writer. I'd spend hours reading books, loved stories, loved the way words could transport you somewhere else, make you feel things. I'd write in notebooks I kept hidden under my bed, short stories mostly. Nothing good, probably, but I loved doing it. When I was 16, I told my father I didn't want to take over the ranch, that I wanted to go to college and study literature, maybe become a writer or a teacher. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, said writing wasn't a real job, that I needed to be practical, that the ranch was my inheritance and my responsibility. My mother agreed, said I was being selfish, that my father had worked his whole life to build something to pass down to me, that walking away from it would break his heart. And here's where the fear kicked in. I was afraid of disappointing them. But more than that, I was afraid of disappointing myself, because what if I pursued writing and failed? What if I went to college and discovered I wasn't actually talented? What if I spent years chasing this dream only to end up with nothing? At least if I stayed on the ranch, I'd know what to expect. I'd have a clear path. I'd have security. I might not be happy, but I also wouldn't have to face the possibility that I wasn't good enough to achieve what I really wanted. So I stayed, told myself I was being responsible, mature. That dreams were nice, but reality mattered more. I took over the ranch when my father's health declined. Spent my 20s and 30s working land I didn't care about, raising cattle I had no passion for. I was miserable. But it was a comfortable misery, a familiar misery, better than the unknown terror of trying and failing. I got married when I was 28. Her name was Ruth. She was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Nice woman. We got along fine. Not passionate love, but compatibility. Everyone said we made a good match. Ruth wanted to move to the city. She'd grown up on a ranch too and was tired of rural life, wanted to experience something different, live somewhere with more opportunities, more culture, more life. She suggested we sell both ranches, take the money, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere we could both pursue things we actually cared about. And I was terrified. Terrified of leaving the security I knew. But even more terrified of what it would mean about me if I took that risk and it didn't work out. If I sold the ranch and moved to the city and couldn't make it, then I'd have given up my safety for nothing. I'd have proven to myself that I wasn't capable of more, So I said no. Told Ruth we needed to be practical, that the ranch was stable income, that starting over was too risky. She was disappointed, but she agreed, and we stayed. Our marriage became functional. We worked together running the ranch, had 2 kids, made it work, but there was no joy in it, no real connection. We were business partners more than lovers, and I could feel Ruth's resentment growing over the years, feel her dreams dying just like mine had. The kids grew up and left as soon as they could. Both moved to cities. Neither wanted anything to do with ranch life, and I didn't blame them. But it also made me realize I'd spent decades doing something nobody even wanted me to, or do. I'd sacrificed my dreams to preserve something that would die with me anyway. Ruth left when I was 54, said she'd spent enough of her life on that ranch, that she was moving to Seattle to live near our daughter. I could come if I wanted, if I was finally ready to leave. And again, the fear. What would it mean about me if I abandoned the ranch now after giving it 30 years? What would it say about all that sacrifice if I just walked away? And what if I moved to Seattle and discovered I was too old, too set in my ways, too broken to build a new life? I stayed. Ruth left. We divorced. And I spent the next 28 years alone on that ranch, doing work I hated, living a life I'd never wanted, all because I was too afraid to disappoint myself by trying for something better and failing. My kids barely spoke to me. They'd call on holidays, visit maybe once a year, but there was distance between us. I'd been emotionally absent their whole childhood, too consumed with my own unhappiness to really be present for them, and now we were strangers. I sold the ranch 2 years ago when I was 80. My health was declining, couldn't keep up with the physical work anymore, moved into a small apartment in town, and for the first time in my life, I had nothing. No work to distract me, no routine to hide behind, just me and 60 years of regret. That's when I started really thinking about my life, about all the choices I'd made, all the times I'd chosen safety over risk, chosen the path I knew over the path I wanted, and I kept asking myself why. Why had I done this to myself? At first I blamed my father, blamed my upbringing, blamed society for telling me I had to be practical, blamed Ruth for leaving, blamed my kids for not understanding, blamed everyone except myself. But 6 months ago, I was going through old boxes and I found those notebooks, the ones I'd filled with stories when I was a teenager. I sat down and read through them. And you know what? They weren't bad. They were rough, sure, but there was something real in them, some spark of talent that could have been developed if I'd pursued it. And that's when it hit me. The reason I'd never pursued writing wasn't because my father said no. It wasn't because I needed to be practical. It was because I was terrified of trying and discovering I wasn't good enough. I was more afraid of disappointing myself than anything else. And once I saw that, I saw it everywhere in my life. I'd stayed on the ranch not because I had to, but because leaving would have meant admitting I'd wasted years. I'd let Ruth leave not because I wanted to stay, but because moving would have meant facing the possibility that I couldn't build a better life. I'd stayed emotionally distant from my kids, not because I didn't love them, but because really showing up as a father meant risking failure at the most important job I'd ever have. Every single major decision in my life had been driven by this fear, this terror of trying for what I actually wanted and proving to myself that I couldn't have it. So instead, I chose to never really try. That way, I could always tell myself that if I had tried, I might have succeeded. The failure wasn't real because I'd never really taken the shot. But that's just another lie we tell ourselves. Not trying is the same as failing. It's actually worse, because at least if you try and fail, you know. You get the answer. You can move on. But if you never try, you spend your whole life in this purgatory of what if. And that's where I spent 82 years. I think about the life I could have had if I'd been brave enough to face that fear, if I'd gone to college and studied writing. Even if I'd failed, even if I'd discovered I wasn't talented enough to make it professionally, at least I would have tried. At least I would have lived according to my own desires instead of just avoiding my own judgment. I think about what my marriage could have been if I'd moved to the city with Ruth, if I'd been willing to take that risk. Maybe we would have struggled, maybe we would have failed, but maybe we would have built something real together, something based on who we actually were instead of who we felt obligated to be. I think about my relationship with my kids, how I could have been present, could have really shown up for them. Yes, I might have made mistakes, might have disappointed myself as a father, but at least they would have had a father who tried, who was there, who loved them enough to risk being imperfect. All of these possibilities, all of these lives I could have lived, and I chose none of them because I was too afraid to disappoint myself. I see people doing this same thing all the time. See them choosing jobs they hate because at least it's secure income. Choosing the safe path means they never have to find out if they could have made it doing what they loved. See them staying in relationships that make them miserable because leaving would mean admitting they wasted years. See? Them not pursuing their dreams because actually going for it means facing the possibility that they're not good enough. And I understand it. That fear is real. That terror of disappointing yourself is more powerful than almost anything else. Because you can handle other people being disappointed in you. You can tell yourself they don't understand, they're wrong, whatever. But disappointing yourself? Proving to yourself that you're not capable of the life you want? That's unbearable. So we protect ourselves from that possibility by never really trying, and we call it being practical or responsible or mature. But really, we're just hiding from ourselves. I'm 82 years old. I spent my entire life running from this fear, and all it got me was a life I didn't want, relationships I destroyed, dreams I never pursued. And now I'm at the end with nothing but regret for all the things I was too afraid to try. If I could go back, I'd tell my 16-year-old self to go to college. Chase the writing. Dream. Yes, you might fail. You might discover you're not good enough, and that will hurt. But not trying will hurt more. Will hurt for 60 years instead of just a few. I'd tell my 28-year-old self to move to the city with Ruth. Build the life you both want instead of the life you think you should have. Yes, it's scary. Yes, you might fail. But staying in a life you hate because you're afraid of failing in a life you want is the real failure. I'd tell my younger self as a father to show up, be present, risk making mistakes, risk not being perfect, because your kids need a real father, not a ghost who's too afraid of his own inadequacy to actually try. But I can't go back. I can only sit here at 82 with this truth I learned too late. The person I was most afraid to disappoint was myself. And in trying to avoid that disappointment, I guaranteed it. Because not living the life you want is the biggest disappointment of all. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, please learn from my mistake. Whatever you're afraid to try because you might not be good enough, try it anyway. Whatever risk you're avoiding because it might not work out, take it anyway. Whatever life you're not pursuing because you're afraid you'll fail at it, pursue it anyway. Because the pain of trying and failing is temporary. But the pain of never trying lasts forever. And the person you're really protecting by playing it safe isn't you. You're just creating a prison for yourself. One where you never have to face your fears, but you also never get to live your life. I wasted 82 years learning this. Don't waste yours. Subscribe if this truth hit you as hard as it hit me.